Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm guessing if you're here, you're looking for that faster path to, well, mastering relationships.
Right. Not through years of therapy, not through luck, but through something you can actually use. Deliberate, actionable knowledge.
Exactly. You want to stop that frustrating cycle of just reacting to people and, start actually creating the connections you want consciously.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We've gone through, well, a whole playbook, really, 50 different strategies, and we've boiled them down to the absolute essentials.
So what's the core idea?
It's a total philosophical overhaul of how you even approach another human being. And it is genuinely a shortcut to getting this right, but you have to commit to the shift.
And that entire shift, the whole philosophy, it really pivots on just one deceptively simple change in your behavior.
Stop taking.
And start giving.
That's it.
Now that sounds a bit like a motivational poster, I have to say. But the sources we're looking at, they give it real teeth. And it starts with a maybe surprising reference point.
It does. The author grounds this entire system in the wisdom found in, of all places, the Broadway musical Camelot.
Camelot, really?
Yeah. King Arthur asks Merlin, how do you handle a woman? And the answer he sings is so straightforward, it's almost disarming. It's just simply love her, merely love her.
It sounds so simplistic. But the argument is that this formula is universal.
Right.
It's not just about romance.
Not at all. It's how you handle a customer, a partner, an employee, your son. If your goal is to manage or influence, the starting point is always to lead with love.
And this is the critical part. We have to be really clear about what love means in this context. It's not what most of us think it is.
Absolutely. This is the distinction that makes the whole philosophy work. In our culture, we usually define love as a feeling. An emotion, a spark, a kind of spontaneous warmth.
Chemistry.
Chemistry, right. But feelings are volatile. They change with the weather, with what you had for lunch. The moment you define love as a mood, it's unreliable.
So what is it then in this framework?
Here, love is explicitly not a feeling. It is a creation. It comes from the spirit, and this is key. It requires imagination and a conscious daily choice.
An act of will.
A total act of will.
So if love is this creative choice, this thing you do, then what's the cost of not doing it? What happens when we just default to our emotions, to that reactionary approach?
Well, for that, we get this fantastic, really visceral metaphor. It's called the dead fish test.
The dead fish test. Okay, I'm intrigued.
This image actually came from a seminar participant in Japan, and it's so insightful. Picture a dead fish. You put it in a fast-moving stream.
Okay.
What does it do? It can only react. The current tosses it around, it smashes into every rock. It's completely driven by the external force of the water. It's passive.
It's a dead thing just being controlled by the life of the stream around it.
And that is the painful mirror for our own lives. If you spend your day reacting to other people's moods, their criticism, their drama, you're letting their stream dictate your path.
You're being the dead fish.
You're essentially being, as the source says, a dead thing, just responding to forces outside of yourself. The philosopher Emmett Fox had a great line for this. He said, "Love is always creative and fear is always destructive."
And reacting is almost always coming from a place of fear or anger or some other low-level emotion.
Exactly. It's destructive. You're letting the external current dictate your internal state.
But the live fish.
The live fish is a creator. It uses its own intention, its own choice to chart its course. It can swim upstream if it wants. It chooses its destination independent of the current.
And that choice, to be the live fish, not the dead one, that's the foundation we need to unpack.
Yeah.
That choice brings us right to our first section, how to actually move from being a reactor to being a creator. And it starts, of course, with where that decision is made in our own minds.
Right. Chapter 4 in our source material really digs into the neurological difference between these two states of being.
So what's happening in the brain?
Well, reactors are operating from the lowest, most ancient parts of the brain, the marginal animal parts responsible for basic survival.
Fight or flight.
Fight, flight, stimulus response. They're stuck in this emotional mud, you could say, just constantly responding to their environment. There's no foresight, no vision, because they're always just scanning for the next immediate threat or insult.
Whereas a creator is using a different part of the brain entirely.
A completely different part. They're engaging the highest, most complete human parts. The prefrontal cortex, our imagination. A creator doesn't wait for a stimulus to react to. They use their imagination to visualize the ideal relationship first.
So they see the outcome they want before they even start talking.
Exactly. You are consciously constructing the reality you want to step into.
And there's a great story that illustrates this shift about a woman named Marianne.
Oh, it's a beautiful illustration.
Yeah.
Marianne worked at a seafood restaurant, and she was trapped in that classic reactor cycle. She was completely consumed by her manager.
Who she hated.
Hated. Secretly called her an idiot, and she spent all of her mental downtime, her commute, her evenings, just obsessing over every little failing of this manager.
So she was dedicating all this creative mental energy to perfecting her own sense of victimhood.
That's the perfect way to put it. Her husband tried to help, but she wasn't looking for a solution. She was, in a way, addicted to the energy of being right and being wronged.
So what broke the cycle for her?
Something completely unexpected. A piece of philosophy from an ancient Japanese sword master.
The sword master.
Or no, right?
Yeah.
The master gave this ultimate strategy for any kind of conflict. He said, the formula for winning the battles of life is to enter into your enemy's heart and become one with your enemies so that your enemy is no longer your enemy.
Oh, a sword master teaching radical empathy. That's ironic.
But Marianne got it. She realized it wasn't about agreeing with her manager or even liking her. It was about shifting her own internal posture. So she made it her new pet project to use her imagination and strategically enter her manager's heart.
What did it actually look like?
She just started asking about her manager's life, genuinely helping her with some logistical problems she was having with her son. She invited her for coffee. Simple things.
So she stopped reacting to the professional idiocy, as she saw it, and started creating a new pathway for connection based on just shared humanity.
And the change was total. She never had another problem with that manager again. And why? Because the problem was never really the manager's actions. The problem was Marianne's reaction to those actions.
She became the live fish.
She became the live fish, creating her own path, completely independent of the current her manager was providing.
That kind of intentionality takes real conscious effort, which is what the source talks about in Chapter 2, with the title, Turn Your Light On.
Yes, it's about making your relationship rational, not leaving it to the whims of chance or how you feel on a particular day.
Which brings us to this story of the really organized friend who, and I have to admit this sounds a little weird at first, he listed his wife's name in code every single day under tasks in his planner.
It sounds incredibly robotic, doesn't it? Almost transactional. Where's the spontaneity? Where's the humanity in scheduling affection?
Exactly. That was my first reaction.
But that's a really powerful point because it highlights a misunderstanding this philosophy tries to correct. You're confusing spontaneity with just leaving things to chance.
Explain that.
This man's rationale was built on the wreckage of his first marriage. It failed precisely because he waited to feel spontaneous. He realized he was living in total bondage to my feelings. He'd feel like doing something nice, but by the time he got around to it, the moment was gone, the energy faded.
So he made the relationship intentional. He scheduled it.
He made it rational and intentional. He dedicated, even if it was just a couple of minutes, that time every day. And by doing that, he made sure his wife never had a reason to doubt his commitment, no matter what his mood was that day. The structure, the system, actually created a reliable space for joy to happen.
That's a great way of putting it.
And this connects directly to the work of Nathaniel Branden on consciousness. He says relationships thrive under high consciousness, and they decay when they become automated.
The driving analogy from the source is perfect for this.
It is. Think about when you first learned to drive a car.
Total focus. Every mirror, every sound, you're on high alert.
That's high consciousness. Now, fast forward 10 years, you can drive while talking on the phone, planning dinner, totally tuned out. Just a tiny automated sliver of your mind is actually engaged.
And we do that in our relationships.
We do the exact same thing. We find a comfortable groove with our partner, and we delegate the relationship to the robot inside us. We stop really seeing them. We stop thinking. We stop creating. And that drop in consciousness is where the vitality just drains away.
So the friend with the planner, he was choosing to drive his relationship with that beginner's focus every single day.
That is the definition of love as a creation.
Okay, so the next step on this journey is maybe the hardest one. It demands a real sacrifice. It's from Chapter 3. Lose yourself.
The self here means that rigid, constructed personality we're always defending. The source really attacks what it calls the damaging myth of personality.
Specifically that phrase, that's just the way I am.
Yes. The source calls that phrase an excuse for intellectual cowardice.
That's a strong claim.
It is, but think about it. People become prisoners of their supposed self. They'll break a promise, they'll fail to grow, they'll sabotage a relationship just to keep that personality intact.
Oh, I can't help it. I'm just a disorganized person.
Precisely. Or, I'm not a morning person. They defend that identity like it's a fortress, even when it's hurting them and everyone around them.
And a part of defending that self is this obsession with controlling our reputation,
Right.
managing what other people think of us.
Oh, it's a draining obsession. The author calls it a deadly blind alley. He uses these great images, like trying to shovel mercury with a pitchfork.
Or nail jello to a wall.
Exactly. It's impossible. And it creates this debilitating anxiety because you're focusing all your energy outward, where you have no control, instead of inward, on your own actions, which is the only thing you can control.
The paradox being, the less you try to control what people think, the more they tend to like you.
It's the beautiful paradox. So the core idea here is you have to flip the script. You have to realize that your identity, who you are, is simply what you do. Action comes before identity.
That is a monumental shift.
It is. You don't wait until you feel kind to do a kind act. You do a kind act, and the identity of a kind person follows.
Like the author's story about buying that obscure CD.
Right. A little touch of Schmilson in the night. He was thinking of hiring this musician, so he bought the CD and mailed it with a personal note.
He wasn't doing it because he woke up that morning feeling particularly thoughtful.
Not at all. He realized, I don't have to wait until it was in my nature to do it. He treated it as an experiment in being thoughtful, a conscious choice to perform an act of kindness, totally separate from his mood or his established personality.
And by doing the action, he created the identity in that moment.
That's it. That willingness to experiment, to act outside the prison of yourself, is the first huge step toward becoming a creator.
So if our identity is built by our actions, then the next logical step is to master the kind of actions we take. Specifically, the strategic power of giving in a way that just shocks people out of their normal expectations.
And that starts with chapter 1. Use the element of surprise.
This idea comes from G.K. Chesterton, who had this beautiful definition of a spiritual experience.
He called it getting an unexpected feeling of absurd good news. And when you apply that to gifts or thank yous or simple gestures, it's the unexpected quality that elevates it from a transaction into a creation.
Because routine is forgettable.
Instantly forgotten, but surprise gets cemented in your memory.
This was really put into practice by a cancer research fundraiser named Mike Bassoff. He created a program called Innovative Thank Yous.
Right, because he understood that the standard thank you, the expected plaque, the form letter, it's immediately just filed away. It's a transactional duty. It fails to honor the emotional depth of why the person gave the money in the first place.
So he had to move beyond just meeting expectations.
He had to generate a genuine emotional impact. His entire focus was on creating a surprise that connected the donor's action to the actual visceral outcome of their generosity.
And the standout example of this is the story of Mrs. Harvey Johnson.
It's incredible. She donated $50,000 after her son died of lymphoma. Now, Bassoff didn't just send her a framed photo of the new lab equipment.
What did he do?
He arranged for her name to get a prominent mention in a highly obscure medical journal, a hematology journal called Blood.
Okay, so a journal no one but a handful of specialists would ever see.
Exactly. Her name was cited in an article about a breakthrough that was achieved using the lab equipment her money had purchased.
But the surprise wasn't just the mention in the journal.
No, that's the thing. It was the delivery. Bassoff flew to Omaha, unannounced, to present her with the copies of the journal himself. The delivery became this high-stakes, unexpected event. The emotional context was everything.
And he said something to her that just lands so powerfully.
He looked at this stunned woman and said, "This isn't going to make you famous. No one reads this but hematologists. But there are, quite frankly, 8 people who are walking around today who wouldn't be alive if it weren't for you."
Wow.
That specific, unexpected validation of her sacrifice, linking her grief directly to 8 living human beings, that guaranteed she would remember that moment for the rest of her life. It turned a transaction into a spiritual experience.
And that element of risk, of commitment in the surprise is what makes it so powerful.
Right.
Which brings up the story of the college roommate.
The tuxedo risk. I love this story.
So this is the roommate who was sort of semi-split up with his girlfriend, Heather. And he's putting on a full tuxedo.
On a Saturday morning.
Just to drop off a single rose and a birthday card for her.
And when his friends challenged him on how absurd this was, wearing a tux for a simple drop-off, his answer was amazing.
He said he wanted her to know that he honored the day she was born.
Think about that. The tuxedo wasn't about trying to get a date. It was a visible, dramatic, slightly absurd commitment ceremony to her worth as a person, completely independent of the current rocky state of their relationship.
It was an action that broke through all the noise and staleness of their recent arguments.
It communicated that he was willing to take a high social risk and operate from a position of commitment, not just from a feeling that might change tomorrow.
And it worked. They were engaged a couple of months later. It's the ultimate example of creating a new dynamic instead of just waiting for one to happen.
And these kinds of external acts of giving, they speak to the deepest needs we have as humans. Chapter 17 really identifies what the great psychologist William James discovered.
It's just the deepest craving in human nature, even deeper than the craving to be loved.
Is the craving to be appreciated.
It's startling because you always assume love is the number one thing. But so many relationships seem to collapse, not because of a lack of affection, but because of a persistent lack of appreciation.
Love confirms your existence. Appreciation validates your effort. And that craving can be, well, weaponized for good, even in a cutthroat market.
Like at the Cuther brothers in Phoenix.
Exactly. They started an office equipment company to challenge Xerox, which was a giant. And they didn't win on price. They won by making customer appreciation their absolute #1 passion.
And their strategy for this was so simple, but so unexpected.
It was brilliant. At Thanksgiving, when every other company is winding down, ignoring their clients, they had all their account managers call every single customer.
Not to sell them anything.
Not to sell a thing, just to genuinely, specifically thank them for their business that year. They leveraged that fundamental human need for appreciation.
And the response was huge.
Overwhelming. It wasn't about the copiers anymore. It was about the acknowledgement, the gratitude. That one simple, intentional, non-transactional act allowed them to dominate their market because they committed to satisfying that deep craving.
So we move from surprise and appreciation to this third, even higher level of giving. Astonishment. This is from chapter 23.
The author traces the evolution here. We started with that old mantra, the customer is always right.
Which is famously untrue.
And totally impractical.
Yep.
Then we evolved to customer satisfaction, which is necessary, but it's not enough. The source warns that if you only satisfy expectations, you create flatliners.
Tell us more about these flatliners. Why isn't satisfaction good enough?
A flatliner is a customer who is totally silent because you met their needs exactly as expected. They're neutral.
So they're not unhappy, but they're not thrilled either.
Right, which means if a competitor comes along with a slightly better deal, that flatliner will walk away without a second thought. There's no loyalty because the relationship was purely functional. To build anything sustainable, you have to move past satisfaction and into delight.
And then there's the luxury home builder, Gary Geetz, who went even further.
He did. His company, Gary Geetz Master Builders, set the standard not at satisfaction, not even at delight, but at customer astonishment.
Astonishment. That's a high bar.
It created this incredible internal culture where his teams were actively competing with each other to find ways to deliver the unexpected.
And their philosophy really culminated in the story of Scott Anderson.
Yeah, this is a powerful one. Scott was a 29-year-old man, and he was dying of colon cancer. And his final wish was just to spend his last days in his boyhood home, which had fallen into terrible disrepair.
And Geetz's team just as Kersey. They saw a small story about this wish in the paper.
They saw the story, they mobilized all their resources, and they decided to attempt the impossible. They rapidly renovated the entire house, turning it into this beautiful healing space, just so Scott Anderson could spend his last 2 weeks of life there.
That's incredible.
It was an act of pure creation, of high-stakes giving with absolutely no thought of financial gain. And when Scott's mother put a plaque by the front door that read, "Astonishment House," it just confirmed it. Their identity wasn't about building houses. It was about making a profound, loving difference. That creative act defined them.
So as we wrap up this idea of strategic giving, we get to chapter 21, which talks about using your best weapon. And it argues that the most powerful psychological tool isn't fear or intimidation, it's love.
This goes against every instinct for so many of us, especially in a conflict. The assumption is that fear works because it forces people to comply.
Right.
But it only forces temporary compliance, and it creates long-term resentment.
The softball game anecdote from the source is the perfect example.
It is. The parents are in the stands, they're screaming at the umpire for bad calls, and what happens? The umpire gets defensive, he throws the parents out, and the next close call is even worse for their team.
Because the fear and hostility just made the umpire dig in his heels.
Exactly. But then the young coach and the players did the opposite. They apologized, they encouraged the umpire, treated him with respect.
And the close calls immediately started going their way.
The hostility was completely disarmed.
And that's the psychological secret, isn't it? Fear makes people rigid and defensive.
But love. As military psychologists have noted, the most powerful psychological weapon known to man is love. Genuine compassion, respect.
There's no defense against love.
It just bypasses all the defenses. People willingly open themselves up to it. We even saw this happen criminally with that I love you computer virus.
Oh, right. It worked so well because people couldn't resist opening an email with that subject line.
Exactly. That emotional appeal was the one thing people would click on, even against all security warnings. When you choose love as your creation, you are choosing the one tool that guarantees openness and disarms psychological resistance every time.
All right, so now we're pivoting from those external actions to the inner discipline.
Yeah.
This is the mechanism that lets us stay in that creator mode, even when our emotions are trying to drag us back into just reacting.
And the key framework for this is from Colin Wilson. It's called The Ladder of Selves, and it's detailed in Chapter 25. It's a really powerful internal model for understanding where your consciousness is at any given moment.
Okay, so if we can picture this ladder, what are the rungs we need to know about?
Well, at the very bottom, you have the lowest rung, the physical self. This is driven by pure instinct, survival, hunger, immediate needs.
And just above that
are the middle rungs, which are the emotional selves. This is where we live most of the time. It's fear, anger, resentment, but also contentment, enjoyment.
And this is where most relationship problems happen, right? On those emotional rungs.
Absolutely. When communication breaks down, it's almost always because we're operating exclusively from there. My fear is talking to your anger. Your resentment is talking to my guilt. It's just a closed loop of emotional reaction.
And no solution is possible down there because the creative, rational part of the mind is offline.
It's totally offline. So to solve the problem, you have to ascend the ladder.
To the higher rungs.
Yes. Above the emotional center is the highest rung of the human mind. Our executive function, our imagination, our strategic thinking. This is the place of real intentionality, where we can detach from all the feelings churning below. And at the very top is pure spirit, the core of our will.
So problems are solved by climbing up, and they get worse when we fall down.
That's the entire model.
This ladder concept also explains the courtship trap perfectly.
Oh, it really does. People make this huge mistake. They think that intense, glorious thrill of early courtship is coming from the new person they're with.
But it's not.
It's not. That thrill is an internal phenomenon. It's their own act of will. For that brief period, they are consciously choosing to live on the highest rungs of their ladder. They're being clever, witty, strategic, thoughtful, fully engaged.
They're driving with that I consciousness we talked about earlier. The high they feel is their own creation.
Exactly. But because they believe the feeling is coming from the outside, from the other person, they fall into what the source calls the Elizabeth Taylor road to happiness.
Meaning they just keep seeking out new partners.
They become perpetual seekers, always chasing that initial high, not realizing they could create and sustain that level of creative consciousness with their existing partner just by choosing to climb their own ladder. The problem isn't external, it's internal laziness.
Realizing that means you have to confront problems head on, even when it's emotionally overwhelming. Chapter 5 says we need to commit an assault of sustained thinking.
And this comes from Voltaire's wisdom. No problem can withstand the assault of sustained thinking. But when it comes to relationships, people actively avoid thinking.
Because it's scary. The feelings take over. I don't want to open that can of worms.
That emotional avoidance is exactly what locks us onto the lower rungs and into the reactor cycle.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do you force your mind up the ladder when it's actively resisting?
How do you do it?
Through forced detachment. One method is to create an inner consultant's voice. You just ask yourself, if my best friend had this exact same problem, what calm, rational, objective advice would I give them?
And that automatically engages the higher thinking centers of the brain.
It does. The other method is even simpler. It's just action-based manipulation of your own mind.
Go on.
The source says to just take out a piece of paper and force yourself to brainstorm 10 ways to solve the problem, no matter how weird or impractical or stupid the ideas seem.
So the quality of the ideas doesn't matter at first.
Not at all. The point is the act of sustained thinking itself. The exercise manipulates you into engaging your thinking mind, and it bypasses that emotional avoidance. And usually the real solution starts to emerge somewhere around idea number 7 or 8.
Which leads perfectly to this idea of action itself, that courage is a result of action, not a prerequisite for it. Chapter 46, jump into action.
And Emerson just nails this. Do the thing and you shall have the power. Courage literally rushes in to catch up with the action you've already taken.
The source, through this coach, Steve Hardison, makes the case that most people's problems aren't that complex. They just stem from an unwillingness to take any action.
His coaching test is amazing because the action he prescribes is totally arbitrary. A client comes in with this massive, debilitating life problem, a career in shambles, a family feud, and Hardison would just ask them to go outside and retrieve a ball he kept tossing across a wide lawn, over and over.
An action that has zero logical connection to their actual problem.
Zero. And yet, after running back and forth, the client would report that the magnitude of their life problem felt like it had shrunk.
Why does that work? Why does this unrelated physical action have that effect?
Because that feeling of helplessness is a physiological state. It's caused by stasis, by being frozen. By performing a purposeful, consistent, oxygen-generating action, the client breaks that internal psychological freeze.
Action recharges the battery.
As Colin Wilson said, it recharges the internal battery. They get back that feeling of agency and control, and suddenly the problem doesn't look like an unscalable wall anymore. It looks like a solvable puzzle. The action creates the power.
And once you've taken action, you can achieve real emotional self-respect. You can celebrate your independence, which is chapter 34.
Emotional independence is that state where your emotions are yours. They are yours to cultivate, yours to nurture, and they are independent of what other people say or do.
It requires rejecting what the source calls the flat earth mistake.
Right. Which is the belief that other people have the absolute inherent power to make you angry or scare you or frustrate you.
But it feels like they do, doesn't it? If someone betrays me, I feel angry. That seems like cause and effect.
It seems like they do, in the same way it seems like the world is flat when you look out your window. But if you truly believe they hold that power over you, you've surrendered all your internal control. The goal is to realize that anger is a choice you make in response to their action. You own the response.
Carson's story of recovery after her breakup is the perfect illustration of this journey.
It is. She was betrayed after a 7-year relationship. That's a trauma that could easily define someone as a victim for life. But instead of letting it paralyze her, she took active ownership of her internal state.
She started building up her body.
Aerobics, dance, chorus, forcing oxygen into her lungs, raising her physiological consciousness. She recognized that negative emotions have a really hard time sticking to a body that is singing with life and purpose.
And what was the final step for her? The mental shift.
It was consciously, actively deciding that the whole situation just doesn't matter. She actually drew strength from the Bill Murray movie Meatballs, where the kids are all chanting, "It just doesn't matter."
That's amazing.
And that realization that her happiness was independent of her ex-partner's actions or whether he ever apologized, that was the key to her freedom. She chose to be the live fish no matter what poison the stream was delivering.
To sustain that, though, you have to
Yeah.
understand commitment itself. Chapter 26, be your commitment.
We often treat commitment like it's a feeling, or even worse, like a virus you catch and then it just fades away.
Right, the spark is gone.
Exactly. But commitment isn't a feeling. It's a conscious, rational decision. It's a creative act. And it's one that has to be renewed every single day. You have to remind yourself of your choice, even for just a moment, every morning.
And the urgency of this is driven home by that story of Dale Doughton visiting the hospital chapel.
He was reading the messages left in the guest book by people who were grieving or waiting or hoping for their loved ones.
That he realized all of life's greatest wisdom is written right there.
In that raw, immediate regret and hope. And his conclusion ties everything together. He said, 9/10 of wisdom is appreciation. Go find somebody's hand and squeeze it while there's time. Commitment is just choosing to act on that appreciation right now.
All right, let's move on to mastering the nuts and bolts of communication, understanding, and maybe most importantly, setting healthy boundaries. We have to start with the single most common destructive habit. It's from chapter 12, Stop changing other people.
This is, as the source calls it, the perfect prescription for misery.
Why is it so bad? Seems like sometimes people need to change.
The attempt to change another person is not only futile, it actually makes the problem worse. When you criticize someone's behavior, let's say their messy desk or their habit of being late, they feel judged.
And when we feel judged,
We get defensive. We immediately defend the very behavior that's being criticized. The author gives his own example. When his wife criticized his cluttered desk, he instantly declared it was necessary to my creativity.
so the habit becomes a principle.
It stops being a habit and becomes a proud principle that you now have to defend, which locks the person even more tightly into the exact behavior you wanted them to stop.
And the really crazy part is, even if you succeed in changing them, you're still not happy. Like the woman whose husband finally quit drinking.
Right, she became a nervous wreck because her happiness was fundamentally conditional on his behavior, not on her own internal creative state. She had handed over control of her own well-being to his actions.
So if your happiness depends on someone else changing, you're lost.
You're lost because they're always going to be subject to change, to error, to their own free will. True happiness has to come from your creative actions, regardless of what path they're on.
This philosophy of having a consistent, integrated skill set is really highlighted in Chapter 9, Creative Friend.
And the Zen wisdom here is non-negotiable. How you do anything is how you do everything.
No compartmentalizing.
None. People who try to compartmentalize, who think they can have a cold, distant professional persona and then magically be a warm, attentive partner at home, they always fail. It just doesn't work that way.
The solution offered is the best friend system.
I love this. It's about a CEO who was struggling with his chairman of the board, and the advice he got was to just treat the chairman exactly the way he would treat Tom, his actual best friend.
So what did that look like in practice?
He realized if it were Tom, he wouldn't send some terse memo. He'd book a nice suite for them, have a long, loose dinner, stay up talking until sunrise if he had to. He would pour energy and fun and looseness into the relationship until the agreement just emerged naturally.
He took his best self, his friend-making self, and intentionally applied it in a corporate setting.
And the result was miracles because he dissolved that artificial boundary between the professional and the personal.
But being able to apply that best self means you have to be straight with yourself first, which Chapter 45 gets at through that common lie. I'm not good with people.
Oh, that lie was everywhere among the service technicians the author was consulting with. They used it like a shield. I'm a techie. I'm an introvert. I deal with machines. I'm not like those slick salespeople.
And the source just calls that out as pure self-deceit.
It is, because the function of that lie, always, is to avoid action.
The action of building a relationship, which feels uncomfortable at first.
Exactly. They were pretending to be naturally bad at it to justify staying passive, but when they were gently pushed to take small, creative actions, a kind word, an unexpected question, they quickly learned they weren't bad with people at all. They had just chosen to be passive. Everyone has the capacity, it's just a matter of willingness to act.
A lot of the source material is dedicated to one specific skill, listening. And it's treated not as a passive thing, but as an active, athletic endeavor.
It is. You have to start by asking yourself, am I a better listener today than I was 3 years ago? And if you don't know the answer, it's because you're treating it passively. To improve, you have to consciously rate your own performance.
And the first skill we need to master is eliminating preoccupation, from Chapter 41.
Preoccupied listening is so destructive because it's fundamentally dishonest. It dishonors the speaker.
You're nodding, making eye contact, saying, uh-huh.
But mentally, you're a million miles away. You're thinking about your counterargument, what you're having for dinner, an email you forgot to send.
And the speaker can feel that absence.
They sense it, and it leads to that vague feeling of disconnect. They walk away thinking, I guess we just don't have chemistry, when the truth is you were just mentally checked out.
Next, we have to eliminate prejudice, which is presented as an intellectual mistake, prejudging.
Prejudice in listening is when you filter what someone is saying through your preconceived notions about them or about the topic. It causes that classic argument dynamic.
I already told you that.
I already told you that, and the listener genuinely replies, no, you didn't, I would have remembered. But they didn't remember because their internal filter was so strong, they only heard the information that confirmed what they already expected to hear. They were listening for confirmation, not for comprehension.
So what's the highest form? What do we aspire to?
That would be creative listening from Chapter 44.
And what does that mean?
Creative listening is active and proactive. Your mind uses a metaphorical save button. You retain and you build upon what the other person says. It's not just absorbing, it's mutual creation.
Like the poetry game the author played with his friend Fred Knight.
Exactly. Each line of the poem had to be a genuine continuation of the previous one, building the image together.
So how does that apply in a real conversation? A business meeting or argument with your partner?
It means every sentence they speak is a building block for you. Instead of countering their proposed solution with your own, which is the reactive method, you intentionally use their idea as the foundation to build an even better mutual solution, the creative method.
So the core question for a creative listener is,
How can I make a positive difference with the person I am listening to right now? That focus on intentional giving keeps your mind fully, creatively engaged.
okay, our final strategy on boundaries is often the hardest one for people pleasers. Learn to say no.
The source argues that no is the strongest word in the English language
Why?
because it forces a stand. It is so much more decisive and powerful than just wishing for a yes. We waste so much energy defining all the things we want, all our yeses, but we fail to clearly define what we absolutely will not tolerate, our no's.
The story of the New Zealand company president is a perfect example of the failure of yes.
She was. She was seduced by saying yes to every speculative idea, every easy commitment, until the company was on the brink of collapse. Her salvation didn't come from wishing for a profitable month. It came when she took a powerful, decisive stand.
She screamed, no.
She screamed no to the very idea of having one more unprofitable month. And that powerful no staked a stand. It fueled every action she took after that to cut costs and rebuild, and it defined the only path forward.
And this applies on a personal level, too.
Critically, just wishing for a relationship is passive. It's futile. But taking a stand against the opposite, no to this isolation, I'm ending it, or no to being defined by my past mistakes, that is incredibly powerful because that no forces you into action. And action, as we know, is what generates the power to create. So we've covered a huge amount of ground here. If we zoom all the way out, what does this all mean for you, the listener? What's the core takeaway?
I think it's that relationships are not accidents. They're not just chemical reactions that happen to us.
That's it. They are deliberate, intentional creations. They are built by action-based giving, not by emotional reaction.
And as we try to move forward with this knowledge, we have to remember that quote from Kierkegaard in chapter 38.
Oh, it's so profound. Life must be understood backward, but it must be lived forward.
And the mistake we all make is trying to live forward based on the limitations we understood from looking backward.
Exactly. Living forward means you have to consistently picture the relationship you want to create. That's your mantra, your ideal reality, and you live into that intention. When your emotions inevitably try to drag you backward into old hurts or fears, you have to gently return your attention to your creative intention.
Like a meditator returning to their breath.
It's the exact same practice.
And the final piece of this puzzle, the final act of creation from chapter 49, is maybe the most important relationship of all.
The one you have with yourself.
You have to actively create your own internal voice.
You do. Most of us are just listening to this worn-out negative recording in our heads, a destructive internal counselor that just parrots every critical voice from our past. That was stupid. You're so disorganized. You'll never get that right.
And that isn't our conscience. It's just old, destructive programming.
That's all it is. And the great act of adult self-creation is to dismantle that voice and consciously install an optimistic internal counselor. A voice that supports you, encourages you, speaks to you from a place of intentionality.
A voice that says, you handled that well, or you always find a way to solve these things.
I'm here for you. I'm always by your side. Who you are to yourself, what you create internally, that determines who you are to everyone else. Choosing optimism, choosing self-support is the most rational, logical position to live from.
So to leave everyone with one final provocative thought that brings all of this into immediate, sharp focus. This builds on the philosophy of Lyndon Duke from chapter 35.
Duke taught that your life's meaning is simply the difference that it makes.
Can we get so caught up in waiting to make the grand difference we prefer to make? The big promotion, the huge donation, the perfect relationship.
But true meaning, real fulfillment, is found by focusing on the differences you can make. Right now, today.
Think back to that image of the old man the author saw every morning. He was just picking up the misplaced newspapers in the street and putting them on the correct front porches.
Such a simple, consistent act of service. No recognition, no reward. It was just his form of difference-making. It wasn't the big difference he might have preferred to make in his life, but it was the difference he could make.
So the final thought is,
If you shift your focus from waiting for the grand gesture to simply performing the small, creative, immediate differences you can make, your skill will grow. Your life will gain meaning. And the powerful, intentional relationships you're looking for they'll flourish all around you. Don't wait for the grand act of creation. Start with the newspaper on the lawn.